Hi there, this is Solitary Ronan from Solitary Ronan Films, and welcome to another episode of Turkey Love. Today we're going to go back all the way to 1987 and Mannequin, starring Andrew McCarthy, Kim Cattrall, Estelle Getty, James Spader, Meshach Taylor, G.W. Bailey, who's the Square from the Police Academy films. Directed by Michael Gottlieb, who made films like Mr. Nanny and A Kid in King Arthur's Court. It would spawn a sequel, Mannequin 2, 4 years later, starring William Ragsdale and Kirsty Swanson, which I have never seen, because that would ruin the legacy of Mannequin. I saw this film in the cinema, and I've always had a soft spot for it, even though obviously objectively it's not actually that good. It was far from being a box office turkey. The budget was $6 million, and allegedly it made $42 million domestically, and it must have made something worldwide, because I at least bought a ticket in 1987 or 1988, whenever it came out in Scotland. And this is another film very much like Weird Science from 1985, which is based or kind of targeted at adolescent males, and the fantasy idea of women as opposed to the reality of women. The mannequin who comes alive, and Emmy, played by Kim Cattrall, never argues with Andrew McCarthy's Jonathan, always wants the best for him. Again, it's a very idealised image of what a woman could be or should be. It is a film very much like Weird Science, which is literally about the objectification of a woman, because she is literally a mannequin that comes to life. Can't get more of an object than that. But let's go back to the beginning. We go to ancient Egypt. We have a very Monty Python Life of Brian introduction card that we find out it's right before lunch. And we have Kim Cattrall, who doesn't want to be married to a camel dung salesman. She wants to do things for herself. A very women's lib character in ancient Egypt. And because she asks the gods for help, there's lightning and she disappears into the ether. And then we cut to Philadelphia in 1987, and we meet Andrew McCarthy's character Jonathan, who works in a mannequin making factory, and he's working on a mannequin who looks rather a lot like Kim Cattrall, but he's taken so long over her and is obsessed about her, so he gets fired from that job. And then we see him being fired from several jobs because he's too artistic, too creative, and it's a stinging indictment on the workplace that there's no room for creativity. They just want results. So he's fired, and then he ends up walking past Prince's department store, which was shot in one of those huge department stores in America. It's now a Macy's, but it was different back then. That's literally almost like a town in a department store. It's absolutely massive inside. And he meets Estelle Getty's character, who is in charge of Prince's that's celebrating its 100th anniversary, but it's down on its knees and it's about to be sold to Illustra, which is a very 80s department store with lots of glitz and glitter and very tacky. And again, it's a searing insight into family-run business versus corporate, cold, bottom line America. And he does somewhat of a favour to Estelle Getty, so he gets taken on and he's introduced to James Spader's character, who is pretty much working for Illustra, trying to drive down Prince and Company. James Spader was obviously quite young in 1987. He would still be 9 years away from getting heavily involved in cars. He's almost channeling a silent comedy villain with his slicked to the side hair and his glasses, his very mannered performance. So, James Spader fan. Mannequin is an essential piece of his career, along with G.W. Bailey, who was always the snitch cop in Police Academy with his dog Rambo. Later on in the film, he gets a dog called Terminator. And obviously, James Spader's character wants the sale to go through, so he'll get credit with the guy who's in charge of Illustra, who's again is another corporate scumbag. So Andrew McCarthy's put in work in the mailroom. He has a girlfriend called Roxy who works for Illustra, even though it's hard to see how or why the two of them are together. But obviously she wants him to make something of his life, whereas he wants to be creative. And again, it's that juxtaposition of you can't be creative and make money at the same time. You have to pretty much become a robot, cold, and just join corporate America. And then he sees Kim Cattrall, the mannequin, in the window, and obviously he's besotted by her. And then again, once they're alone, she comes to life. There's no spoilers here. She comes to life, which obviously he's surprised about. And they design a window together, because obviously that's what you would do. And he falls asleep, he wakes up, and all of a sudden there's people outside fascinated by this window presentation. And he sparks Prince and Company into life, and there's people coming, because when he originally goes in, there's a nice moment where he asks, when do you open? And Estelle Getty says, we are open, but there's just nobody in the store. Obviously he thinks he's been dreaming this, but again he can only see Amy when he's alone. If anybody else is there, she immediately turns back into the mannequin, which obviously raises eyebrows when he's dancing around the store with her, etc., to cheesy 80s music with that horrible drum sound that 80s music had. Starship, who used to be Jefferson Airplane, had a huge hit with Nothing's Gonna Stop Us Now. Again, with that, I think I actually bought the single, different days, with that horrible drum sound from the 80s. He meets a fellow worker called Hollywood, who's a flamboyant gay character, played by the same guy who gets halved in the lift in Omen 2. And again, at the start, we're meant to kind of laugh at this guy his flamboyant nature, but in actual fact Hollywood becomes almost the heart of the film, because he's Jonathan's best friend. He's the one that Jonathan doesn't confide in, but he's the one that's always like by his side. And yes, you could argue it's like a stereotypical gay character, but he does get a lot of screen time, and again, he's there to support Jonathan, and Jonathan certainly doesn't laugh at him, and it is actually one of the kind of earliest kind of gay portrayals in like a mainstream comedy, that isn't as condescending as you maybe might think in the first kind of viewing of the film. There's a wonderful moment. He dresses very flamboyantly because he's a designer as well, and when they have a board meeting to decide whether Jonathan's going to get fired for making this really successful window presentation, Hollywood takes the drastic step of actually taking off his flamboyant suit and actually having a regular suit, which he pleads Jonathan not to tell anybody that he's actually wearing like a normal suit. So he's a fun character as well, very colourful. And obviously we get corporate espionage as Illustra, the head of Illustra, wants to find out how Jonathan is doing these amazing window designs that are bringing customers back to Prince and Company while people are staying away from Illustra. And all manner of comedy hijinks ensue. And then Jonathan becomes vice president, but there's no kind of, like I say, there's no falling out between Emmy and Jonathan that might happen in other rom-coms. The only danger is when Emmy eventually gets kidnapped by Roxy and James Spader and is about to go into the massive threshing machine that's going to chew her up. That's really the only danger, but there's no kind of, they fall out and then they get back together at the end. They're always madly in love with each other, or in as love as you can be with a mannequin. Again, it's that nice little thing about objectification, and women as literally the object of desires. It's essentially a modern fairy tale covered in 80s drum sounds, with outrageous performances, especially James Spader. Andrew McCarthy does Andrew McCarthy, with that little smug grin that he has that at times is really annoying. Obviously he would have a run of successful films in the 80s with Class and Catholic Boys and St Elmo's Fire and Pretty in Pink and Lesson Zero and Weekend at Bernie's. Then obviously as he got older he kind of became less of a box office hit and became a bit of a supporting character, and then went into TV a lot. But certainly from that run from maybe like 83 to 90, Andrew McCarthy was pretty big. So objectively it's not a very good film, but that's why it's in Turkey Love and not neglected gems, because I'm certainly not going to say this is a neglected gem. This is a film that's been in my life for 35 years, and there's just something about it. Again, it is probably that male fantasy, very much like Weird Science, as I said, of the idea of a woman that'll actually like you all the time, which is obviously quite a bizarre concept. So thanks very much for watching this episode of Turkey Love. Please let me know in the comments what you think of Mannequin, or how good is Mannequin 2 on the move, and hopefully join me again for more Turkey Love, because that's what this channel is all about. So this is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, saying farewell.